The mountain air in Colorado was supposed to be refreshing, but all I could taste was bitterness as I watched my boss, Richard, heap praise on Tyler during our quarterly company retreat. We were sitting in a circle of uncomfortable wooden chairs at the Pine Ridge Corporate Center, surrounded by towering evergreens that seemed to mock my diminishing confidence. Tyler's quarterly numbers have been absolutely phenomenal, Richard announced to our team of 12, his voice echoing in the rustic conference room. His client retention strategy has boosted our revenue by 15% this quarter alone. I shifted in my seat, the rough fabric of my blazer suddenly feeling too tight. For 3 years, I'd been grinding away as a senior analyst at Morrison Tech Solutions, a mid-sized software consulting firm based in Denver. While Tyler had been schmoozing clients at expensive dinners, I'd been buried in spreadsheets and data models, quietly identifying inefficiencies that could save the company thousands. What about Jordan's cost optimization analysis? Lisa, our HR director, chimed in. She was one of the few people who actually paid attention to my work. Those recommendations could potentially save us significant money. Richard barely glanced in my direction. Sure. Cost-cutting is important, too. His dismissive tone made my stomach clench. 3 months of late nights, analyzing every department's expenditures, reduced to sure. Tyler flashed me a sympathetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. At 28, he was 2 years younger than me, but somehow always managed to command the room with his confident demeanor and perfectly styled brown hair. I touched my own disheveled blonde locks self-consciously. Actually, Tyler said, leaning forward with practiced enthusiasm, I think we should focus on growth initiatives rather than penny pinching. Revenue generation is what really drives success. Several team members nodded in agreement. I felt heat rising in my cheeks as my months of careful work were dismissed as penny pinching. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, storm clouds were gathering over the Rocky Mountains, matching my darkening mood. Exactly my thoughts, Richard beamed. This is why Tyler will be leading our new client acquisition initiative. It's a high-visibility project that could open doors to some major contracts. My heart sank. I'd been hoping for that project myself, had even mentioned my interest to Richard weeks ago. Apparently, my suggestion had fallen on deaf ears. As the morning session ended and people began filing out for the lunch break, I remained seated, staring at my untouched notepad. The sound of conversations and laughter faded as my colleagues headed to the dining hall, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the growing storm outside. I pulled out my laptop and opened the file I'd been working on in secret, a comprehensive analysis of our company's operational inefficiencies. What I discovered was staggering. We were hemorrhaging money in ways that went far beyond typical overhead costs. But looking at Richard's reaction today, I wondered if anyone would ever take my findings seriously. Thunder rumbled in the distance as the first drops of rain began pattering against the windows. By evening, the storm had intensified, and our planned outdoor team-building activities were moved to the resort's game room. I found myself nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee while watching Tyler hold court at the pool table, regaling half our team with stories of his latest client conquest. You should join us, called out Michelle, our marketing coordinator, gesturing toward a group playing charades near the fireplace. I forced a smile. Maybe in a bit. Just reviewing some numbers. It wasn't entirely a lie. I'd spent the afternoon diving deeper into the data I'd been analyzing, and what I'd found was keeping me awake despite the late hour. Hidden in our vendor contracts and operational expenses was a pattern that made my blood run cold. My laptop screen cast a blue glow across my face as I cross-referenced invoice dates with project timelines. Our largest vendor, Data Flow Systems, had been billing us for services that either weren't delivered or were grossly overcharged. The pattern went back 18 months, almost exactly when Tyler had been promoted to his current role and given authority over vendor relationships. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Either Tyler was incredibly incompetent at managing these contracts, or something more sinister was happening. Given his reputation for being detail-oriented with clients, incompetence seemed unlikely. Working late again, Jordan. I looked up to find Tyler approaching with 2 beers in hand, his smile as charming as ever. He extended one toward me, but I shook my head. Just catching up on some analysis, I replied carefully, minimizing the window on my screen. Tyler settled into the leather chair across from me, the firelight dancing across his features. You know, I noticed Richard was pretty dismissive of your cost analysis today. That must have stung. His tone was sympathetic, but something in his eyes made me uneasy. It's fine. Numbers don't lie, even if people ignore them. True, he said, taking a long sip of his beer. Though sometimes it's better to focus on opportunities rather than problems. Clients want to hear about growth, not cutbacks. I nodded noncommittally, my mind racing. Was he fishing to see what I knew? Of course. Growth is important. Exactly. That's why this new client acquisition project is so crucial. We need to think big picture. He leaned forward slightly. Speaking of which, have you noticed anything unusual in our operational expenses lately? Richard mentioned you've been doing some deep dive analysis. My heart began pounding, but I kept my expression neutral. Just the usual inefficiencies. Nothing that can't be optimized. Tyler studied my face for a moment longer than felt comfortable, then stood up with another one of his practice smiles. Well, don't work too hard. Tomorrow's our last day here, and you should enjoy it. As he walked away to rejoin the group, I reopened my analysis. The numbers were even worse than I'd initially calculated. If my suspicions were correct, data flow systems had been overcharging us by nearly $200,000 over the past year and a half. For a company our size, that was enough to impact our quarterly earnings significantly. I glanced across the room at Tyler, who was now laughing at something Richard had said. They looked like they didn't have a care in the world, while I sat here with evidence that could destroy Tyler's career and possibly land him in legal trouble. But I needed more proof before I could act. Accusations like this required absolute certainty. I spent the next 2 hours digging through every contract, every invoice, every email chain I could access through our company portal. By midnight, as the game room emptied and the storm continued to rage outside, I had built an airtight case. The question now was what to do with it. The final morning of our retreat dawned clear and bright, yesterday's storm having washed the Colorado air clean. I'd barely slept, my mind churning over the evidence I'd compiled. During breakfast, I watched Tyler charm our potential clients during the networking session, his easy laugh and confident handshake opening doors that had remained closed to others on our team. "You look terrible," Lisa observed, sliding into the seat next to me in the conference room where our final presentations were about to begin. "Rough night," I admitted, nursing my third cup of coffee. My hands were shaking slightly, though whether from caffeine or nerves, I couldn't tell. Richard called the room to attention. "All right, everyone. Before we wrap up this retreat, I want to hear final thoughts and any insights you've gained over the past few days. Tyler, why don't you start us off?" Tyler stood smoothly, commanding the room's attention as always. "I've been thinking about sustainable growth strategies that could help us expand our client base while maintaining our reputation for excellence. The key is building trust through consistent delivery and transparent communication." The irony of his words about transparency made my stomach churn. Several colleagues nodded approvingly as Tyler outlined his vision for the client acquisition project, complete with projected revenue increases and market expansion opportunities. "Excellent insights," Richard praised. "Anyone else?" This was my moment. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slowly stood up. "Actually, I'd like to share something that could significantly impact our company's financial health." The room fell silent. Richard looked mildly annoyed at what he probably assumed would be another dry presentation about cost-cutting measures. "Over the past few months, I've been conducting a comprehensive analysis of our operational expenses." I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "What I discovered is that we're losing approximately $200,000 annually due to irregularities in our vendor relationships." Tyler's face remained composed, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. "That's quite an accusation," Richard said slowly. "What kind of irregularities?" I opened my laptop and connected it to the room's projector, my hands trembling slightly as I navigated to my presentation. Data Flow Systems has been our largest vendor for operational support services. However, their billing patterns show consistent overcharges for services either not delivered or significantly marked up beyond market rates. The room erupted in murmurs as my detailed analysis filled the screen. Charts showed the correlation between Tyler's promotion and the suspicious billing increases. Email timestamps revealed instances where we were charged for services on days when no work was performed. "This is Richard's voice trailed off as he studied the data. Tyler, you've been managing the data flow relationship. What's your response to this? Tyler's charm faltered for the first time since I'd known him. There must be some mistake in the analysis. Dataflow has been a reliable partner, and their services have been essential to our client satisfaction ratings. Then explain this, I said, highlighting a particularly damning section. We were charged $15,000 for emergency server maintenance on Christmas Day, when our entire system was scheduled for downtime and no clients were accessing our platforms. The silence in the room was deafening. Tyler's face had gone pale, and I could see sweat beginning to form on his forehead despite the cool mountain air flowing through the open windows. I need to investigate this further, Richard said finally, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Tyler, I want you to gather all documentation related to the Dataflow contracts. Jordan, can you send me your complete analysis? It's already in your email, I replied quietly. Richard's phone buzzed, and his face grew increasingly grim as he scrolled through my report. We're ending the session early. I need to make some calls immediately. As people began filing out, Tyler approached me, his confident facade completely shattered. You have no idea what you've just done, he whispered, his voice shaking with rage and fear. I know exactly what I've done, I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. I've protected our company from further fraud. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Through the conference room windows, I could see our colleagues gathered in small groups on the retreat center's deck, their animated conversations undoubtedly centered on what had just transpired. The morning sun painted the Rocky Mountains in brilliant gold, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. 3 weeks later, I sat in Richard's corner office in downtown Denver, watching the bustling city life through his floor-to-ceiling windows. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across his mahogany desk, where a thick folder labeled Dataflow Investigation lay open between us. The external audit confirmed everything in your analysis, Richard said, his tone a mixture of gratitude and embarrassment. Tyler had been receiving kickbacks from Dataflow for approving inflated invoices. The total amount of fraud over 18 months was $247,000. I nodded, though hearing the final numbers still made my stomach clench. What happens now? Tyler was terminated immediately, of course. We've also filed criminal charges and recovered about 60% of the stolen funds from Dataflow. They're facing their own legal issues now. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying me with newfound respect. I owe you an apology, Jordan. I was so focused on flashy presentations and client schmoozing that I missed the real value you bring to this company. The apology felt surreal after years of being overlooked. I just did my job. No, you did much more than that. Your attention to detail and analytical skills quite literally saved this company. That money we were losing, it would have put us in serious financial trouble within another year, especially with the economic uncertainties we're facing. Richard opened another folder on his desk. Which brings me to why I asked you here today. I'm restructuring our operations, and I want you to head up our new financial integrity department. It would be a senior management position with a 30% salary increase and direct reporting to me. My breath caught. After years of being overlooked, the sudden recognition felt overwhelming. What would that involve? Exactly what you've been doing, but with a team and the authority to implement changes immediately. You'd be responsible for auditing all our vendor relationships, optimizing operational costs, and ensuring financial transparency across all departments. He slid a formal offer letter across the desk. You've proven you have the skills and integrity we need in leadership. I picked up the letter, scanning the details. The salary increase was even more generous than he'd mentioned, and the benefits package included equity options I'd never dreamed of receiving. There's one more thing, Richard continued. That client acquisition project Tyler was supposed to lead? I want you to take it over. Your analysis showed that our financial house wasn't in order. Now I need someone I trust to help us grow sustainably. The irony wasn't lost on me. The project I'd wanted months ago was finally being offered, but now it came with so much more responsibility and recognition. I accept, I said without hesitation. Richard smiled genuinely for the first time since I'd known him. Welcome to senior management, Jordan. Your first team meeting is Monday. As I walked out of his office, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed since that humiliating day at the retreat. Tyler's betrayal had initially seemed like just another disappointment in a long string of professional setbacks. But by staying true to my principles and trusting in my analytical skills, I'd not only exposed serious fraud, but had also finally earned the recognition I deserved. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Heard the news. Drinks tonight to celebrate our new department head. I smiled, typing back. Absolutely. I'm buying. Walking through the office, I noticed how differently my colleagues looked at me now. The whispered conversations and respectful nods were a far cry from the dismissive glances I'd grown accustomed to. My cubicle, which would be replaced by a real office next week, was decorated with congratulatory notes and flowers from the team. As I gathered my things to leave for the weekend, I thought about Tyler. According to office rumors, he was facing serious legal consequences and would likely never work in finance again. Part of me felt sorry for him. His need for recognition and quick success had led him down a path that destroyed his career and reputation. But mostly I felt grateful. His betrayal had forced me to dig deeper, to trust my instincts, and to stand up for what was right even when it was uncomfortable. The retreat that had started as such a humiliating experience had ultimately become the catalyst for the most important breakthrough of my career. Outside, the Denver skyline sparkled in the setting sun, full of possibility and promise. For the first time in years, I felt truly optimistic about my future. Sometimes the biggest victories come not from seeking the spotlight, but from quietly doing excellent work and having the courage to speak truth when it matters most. My integrity had not only saved the company, it had finally earned me the respect and recognition I'd been seeking all along.